You felt it before you clicked, not as a thought, more like a quiet pause. Something in you had already leaned forward. And that's the part that matters, because this isn't really about a video. It's about a pattern you've been noticing lately, but haven't fully named. Small moments that feel slightly out of sequence. Conversations that echo something you were thinking hours earlier. A line in a book that feels like it was written for this exact week of your life. Nothing dramatic, just precise. And you don't tell many people about it because it sounds ordinary when spoken out loud. But internally, it doesn't feel ordinary. It feels arranged, not controlled, not planned in some rigid way, just aligned. There's a difference. And maybe that's what you've been sensing, that subtle shift from effort to alignment, from chasing to noticing. It's strange how awareness works. The moment you start paying attention to something, it begins appearing everywhere. But this feels different. It's not that you're looking for signs. It's that things are finding you. Pause there, because that distinction changes everything. Most people move through their day, responding to noise, chasing outcomes, trying to push life into shape. You've been doing something quieter, observing, not withdrawing, not disconnecting, just watching. And in that watching, something began to rearrange itself. Around minute 3, there's something subtle we'll return to. The way timing has felt slightly altered for you. Not faster, not slower, just different. But for now, stay with this. There are moments recently where you felt less urgency, less need to prove, less need to explain yourself. Almost like a version of you stepped slightly ahead and you're catching up to it. You might have noticed it in simple ways. The way certain conflicts no longer trigger you the same way. The way you no longer chase validation from people who can't see you. The way silence feels less uncomfortable than it used to. That isn't indifference, it's alignment. And alignment doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It feels neutral, clear, almost ordinary, but ordinary in a way that feels powerful. There's a quiet awakening happening collectively right now. Not loud, not revolutionary in appearance, individual, personal, people waking up in their own living rooms, during routine drives, while washing dishes, realizing something subtle has shifted in their perception. And maybe you felt that too, like you've stepped half an inch outside your previous identity, not rejecting who you were, just not confined to it anymore. That's the field adjusting. Not externally, internally, because consciousness isn't something you possess. It's the space you're moving within. And when your state shifts, even slightly, reality reflects differently. Not as reward, as mirror. This is where most people misunderstand the process. They think change requires force, effort, struggle, but reflection responds to state, not demand. And lately, your state has been different, calmer, more aware of your own awareness. You've caught yourself noticing your own thoughts without fully believing them. That's new and subtle, but powerful. There's a version of you that already understands this. Not intellectually, experientially. You've glimpsed it in small flashes. Moments where time felt layered, where the present felt thicker somehow, like it contained more than just now. That sensation isn't random, but we'll let that sit for a while. Notice something. You're less interested in being right lately, more interested in being aligned, less interested in controlling outcomes, more curious about what unfolds when you stop forcing them. That curiosity is the message, not external, internal. Because when perception shifts, the world reorganizes itself around that shift. And you've been adjusting your perception quietly for months now, maybe years. You didn't announce it. You didn't declare it. But something in you stopped chasing versions of yourself that no longer felt authentic. That matters more than you realize. There are parallel versions of you that exist as possibilities, not fantasy, potential, and each version corresponds to a state, a frequency of perception. When you soften resistance, you slide, not jump, slide, into a version of yourself that already exists. Most people won't notice when that slide happens. It looks like normal life, but internally it feels like relief, like something clicking into place. Have you felt that recently? Not a dramatic breakthrough, just a quiet exhale. That's not coincidence, that's coherence. Around minute 10, we'll touch something deeper about choice and how it isn't always loud. It often feels like letting go rather than deciding. But first, let's talk about forgetting. Forgetting isn't failure, it's part of the design. You don't remember who you are in full because the experience requires rediscovery. And rediscovery only feels meaningful if there was distance first. That distance created the tension, the searching, the feeling of misalignment. And misalignment isn't punishment, it's feedback. Like static when you're slightly off the station. You've been adjusting your dial, slowly, sometimes unconsciously, and now the signal feels clearer. Not perfect, clearer. There's less inner noise, less self-judgment, more observation. And when you observe without condemning, something opens. You become the space in which thoughts happen instead of the thoughts themselves. That shift changes your relationship with reality, because if reality is reflection, then perception is the lens. And your lens has been cleaning itself, without ceremony, without announcement, just through quiet awareness. Look back at the last few months. Notice how certain people drifted out naturally. No drama, just divergence. Notice how new conversations began appearing, topics that resonate more deeply, ideas that feel less abstract and more lived. This isn't random. It's alignment expressing itself. You don't force alignment. You allow it, and allowing feels like surrender at first, which can feel uncomfortable because control feels safer, but control is tight. Alignment is open. You've been loosening your grip, and the moment you loosen, reflection shifts. It has to, because the field responds to state, not to effort. Here's the quiet realization: you are not waiting for a message. You are the point where the message is landing. That feels subtle, but sit with it. There's a difference between searching for meaning and becoming aware that meaning is already present. And lately, meaning feels closer, more integrated, less external. You might have caught yourself thinking, this isn't random, about small things, encounters, timing, internal nudges. That thought wasn't dramatic. It was calm, matter of fact. That's awareness expanding. Not explosively, gently. And when awareness expands, identity shifts. Because you can't see more without becoming more, even slightly. Notice how your sense of time has changed. Moments feel stretched or compressed. Certain days feel symbolic, layered, like they contain echoes of something beyond the visible events. That's not imagination. It's perception widening, and most people won't notice it because they're focused outward. You've been turning inward, not obsessively, just attentively. And attention is power, not power over others, power of clarity. Clarity reveals pattern, patterns reveal alignment. Alignment reveals reflection. That's a loop, but a gentle one. There's something else happening too. You're less reactive to fear-based narratives. Less pulled into collective panic. You see it, but you're not swallowed by it. That distance isn't attachment, it's awareness. A quiet individual awakening happening globally. People waking up in their own timelines, in their own rhythm, not in unison, but in coherence, and you're part of that coherence. You feel it when you sense belonging without needing agreement. When you recognize others who seem to get it without explanation. It's subtle, but real. There's an undercurrent moving through consciousness right now, not loud enough for headlines, strong enough for recognition, and recognition doesn't need proof. It needs resonance. If this resonates, you already understand. And if you've ever felt like certain moments were arranged not to control you, but to reflect you, that feeling is worth acknowledging. No need to define it, just notice it. Around minute 20, something will connect. The idea that what feels like external timing may actually be internal readiness, but we're not there yet. Right now, stay with the sense that something reached you, not through force, through alignment. Because alignment draws experiences the way a mirror draws reflection, Effort pushes, alignment attracts, not through technique, through state. You've shifted state quietly, which means the reflections are shifting too. And most people won't notice when it happens. They'll call it coincidence, luck, random timing. But you felt the difference. You paused before clicking. You sensed familiarity in something you hadn't seen before. That's not about content. It's about consciousness recognizing itself. There's a line in the ebook Parallel Realities that touches this gently, not as theory, but as lived perception, that sometimes the version of you who already understands is the one guiding the current moment, not guiding through control, through resonance. And resonance feels like this, like remembering something important without being told what it is. You didn't learn something new tonight. You felt something align that's different. And maybe after this ends, you'll notice the next small moment that feels slightly precise, a message in a conversation, a thought that arrives before an event, a calm certainty that something wasn't random. You won't need to announce it. You'll just know, and that knowing won't feel loud. It will feel familiar because the message isn't external. It's the alignment becoming visible. Not everyone will notice, but you did. And that's enough. Sit with that, not as conclusion, as continuation. Because this awareness doesn't end here, it moves with you into the next conversation, the next choice, the next quiet recognition that something is reflecting you more clearly than before. And when that happens again, and it will, you won't question it the same way. You'll simply observe calmly, knowing that what reaches you meets you, and what meets you mirrors you. And maybe that was never random at all. You've been noticing something about space, not physical space, inner space. There's more of it lately, more room between a thought and your reaction, more distance between what happens and what it means. That space wasn't always there. There was a time when everything felt immediate, compressed, urgent. Now it feels expanded. And expansion doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like neutrality, like you're watching your own life from half a step behind your eyes. Not disconnected, just aware. That awareness changes everything. Because when you become aware of perception itself, reality stops feeling solid and starts feeling reflective. Not fake, not imaginary, reflective. As if what you're seeing is responding to something within you. And here's the quiet part most people miss. It always has been. But you weren't always positioned to see it. There's a subtle shift that happens when identity loosens, when you stop defending who you thought you were supposed to be, when you stop arguing internally with your own direction. That shift doesn't feel like victory, it feels like relief, like putting something heavy down without realizing you were carrying it. You may not remember the exact day it started, but you can feel the difference now. You're less interested in forcing your path, more curious about what aligns naturally. That curiosity is not passive, it's precise. It's the beginning of a different relationship with choice. Most people think choice is loud, a declaration, a turning point. But the choices that change everything are often quiet. They look like not responding, letting go, walking away without explanation, trusting an inner nudge without proof. And each of those small, almost invisible decisions shifts the field around you, because consciousness isn't separate from your experience. It is the medium of it. And when your state changes, the medium reorganizes. You felt that. Certain things that used to feel stuck now move more easily. Certain delays that used to frustrate you now feel neutral. Even your sense of timing has changed. This is where that earlier thread comes back. The way time feels slightly different lately. Not faster, not slower, just more responsive. Almost like events are syncing with your internal readiness instead of external pressure. That's not mystical. It's perceptual. When resistance drops, movement appears. And you've been releasing resistance quietly, not through dramatic breakthroughs, through subtle honesty, admitting what no longer fits, acknowledging what feels true without needing validation. That kind of honesty recalibrates your alignment, and alignment doesn't chase, it draws. There are parallel versions of you, not in a science fiction sense, but in a potential sense. Versions defined by different states, different assumptions, different levels of awareness. You don't become them through effort. You resonate into them, and resonance is quiet. It feels like familiarity, like recognizing yourself in something you haven't done yet. Have you felt that? A strange comfort with something new. A sense that you've already lived this decision somewhere inside. That sensation isn't random. It's alignment catching up with awareness. Most people overlook it because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives as calm certainty, and calm certainty is easy to dismiss. But you didn't dismiss it, you followed it, even slightly. And that slight following changed your trajectory more than you realize. There's something else happening underneath all of this. You're less afraid of uncertainty, not because you control it, but because you trust your perception within it. That trust didn't come from learning more. It came from observing yourself more honestly. You noticed patterns in your reactions. You saw how certain fears weren't actually yours. They were inherited narratives, collective noise. And once you saw that, something loosened. You stopped absorbing everything. You started filtering, not aggressively, naturally. That natural filtering creates clarity, and clarity shifts identity. Because when you see clearly, you can't pretend you don't. There's a quiet global awakening happening, but it's not dramatic. It's personal. People realizing their suffering wasn't punishment. It was misalignment, not moral failure. Just feedback. When you move out of alignment with your own state, friction appears, not to hurt you, to redirect you. And you've been listening to that redirection more lately, instead of fighting it, instead of labeling it as failure. That listening changed your path. You may not have noticed the exact moment, but you feel the result, less internal conflict, more internal coherence. And coherence feels steady, like a low hum underneath everything. It's subtle, but stable. Here's something worth sitting with. The message reaching you isn't external information. It's confirmation of alignment you already shifted into. That's why it feels familiar, not new. Recognition doesn't feel like surprise. It feels like remembering. You didn't arrive here by accident, not because some external force placed you here, but because your perception aligned with this reflection. You could have scrolled past, but you paused. And that pause says more than any explanation. There's something about your current state that resonates with this exact moment. That resonance is the message. And it will continue after this ends. Because alignment doesn't stop when the video does. It moves with you into your next interaction, your next quiet decision, your next subtle realization that something wasn't random. Around minute 20, that idea will feel even clearer. That what you call coincidence may simply be alignment becoming visible. But for now, notice the calm, the steadiness, the absence of urgency. That absence isn't emptiness, it's trust. Trust in your awareness. Trust that when something aligns, it meets you. You don't have to chase it. And the more you stop chasing, the more precise the reflections become. That precision can feel surreal at first, but eventually it feels normal. Integrated, like this has always been how reality works. You just weren't positioned to see it before. Now you are. And most people won't notice when that shift happens in themselves. They'll continue reacting. You're observing. That observation is the turning point. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear. And clarity, once seen, doesn't disappear. It deepens, which means this isn't finished. It's unfolding, quietly, exactly as it needs to. There's a moment that happens quietly, not when something begins, not when something ends, but when you realize you're no longer standing in the same internal place you were before. You may not remember the exact step that moved you, but you can feel that you've moved. That's what this has been about the entire time. Not a message arriving from outside, but a shift that already occurred inside you, becoming visible through reflection. Around minute 20, we hinted at something. That what looks like coincidence might simply be internal readiness expressing itself. Let that land now. When you are ready to perceive something, it appears. Not because it was sent, but because you are aligned with it. Reality does not deliver lessons, it reflects state. And when your state changes, so does what you notice. That's why the same world can feel completely different to two people standing in the same room. Perception is the field, awareness is the filter. And you've been adjusting your filter, not aggressively, not through effort, through honesty, through subtle recalibration. You stopped pretending certain paths felt right when they didn't. You stopped forcing alignment where there was friction. You allowed discomfort to guide you instead of define you. And slowly, something began to mirror that shift. You began to see precision, timing that felt almost personal, moments that clicked into place without struggle. And here's the part most people miss. Precision isn't rare. Misalignment is common. When alignment returns, precision feels magical, but it's actually natural. You've tasted that natural state recently, the state where effort softens, where decisions feel lighter, where you sense the next step before overthinking it. That sensing isn't fantasy, it's coherence. There are versions of you that exist as potential pathways. You don't create them. You tune to them, like adjusting a dial. And when you tune correctly, the signal strengthens. You feel less scattered, less divided, more whole. Not because life became perfect, but because your internal resistance decreased. Resistance creates distortion, clarity reduces it. And clarity feels like this, calm, observant, steady. You're no longer trying to outrun your own reflection. You're standing still enough to see it. And what you're seeing isn't random, it's relational. The field responds to who you are being, not who you're trying to become. And who you are being lately is different, more aware of your own awareness, less reactive to fear-based narratives, more grounded in perception rather than belief. Beliefs can shift, perception evolves, awareness deepens. And when awareness deepens, identity expands. Not outwardly, internally. There's a quiet belonging you've been feeling. Not belonging to a group, but belonging to your own path. That's new. You don't need consensus anymore. You need coherence. And coherence feels like integrity between thought, feeling, and action. When those align, reality stabilizes. It doesn't mean challenges disappear. It means they reflect rather than attack. Suffering begins to look less like punishment and more like feedback. A gentle nudge that something is slightly off frequency. You've started listening to those nudges instead of fighting them. That listening is alignment, and alignment attracts reflection, not through force, through resonance. There's something quietly happening across the collective right now. Individuals waking up independently, not following a leader, not declaring a movement, just recognizing themselves in new ways. But recognition is subtle, but spreading. And when two people who recognize it meet, there's no need for explanation. It's understood. You may have experienced that recently. A conversation where very little needed to be said. A glance that carried depth. A shared silence that felt full. That's awareness resonating with awareness. And you're more sensitive because you've allowed your own perception to sharpen. You've stepped slightly outside inherited identities. Slightly beyond collective fear. Slightly closer to your own field. And when you move closer to your own field, reflections become more precise. You begin noticing how certain thoughts precede events, how certain states attract certain interactions, not through technique, through alignment. This is where something important becomes clear. You weren't chosen, you aligned. And alignment feels like remembering, not receiving, remembering. The message wasn't sent, it became visible. Because you were in a position to see it. That's why this doesn't feel new. It feels familiar. It feels like confirmation. Like something you already knew quietly being mirrored back. And maybe as you sit here now, you can sense that this isn't the end of a thought. It's the continuation of something that started before you clicked. You don't need to label it. You don't need to define it. Just notice how your body feels right now. Steady, calm, present. That steadiness isn't created by words. It's created by recognition. Recognition reorganizes identity. Identity reorganizes perception. Perception reorganizes experience. It's a loop, but not a closed one, an evolving one. And if you've ever felt like you were slightly ahead of your own timeline, like parts of you were waiting for you to catch up, that feeling makes more sense now, because readiness doesn't shout, it stabilizes. And when you stabilize, what aligns becomes obvious. Not flashy, obvious. There's a line in parallel realities that moves quietly through this same space, not as instruction, but as reflection, that sometimes the next version of you isn't waiting in the future, it's waiting in perception. And when perception shifts, the future feels immediate, not because time collapsed, but because resistance dissolved. You're not chasing a path anymore, you're recognizing it. And recognition feels calm. If something here felt familiar, if something echoed a thought you've had alone, if you've sensed lately that events feel slightly precise, you're not imagining that. You're observing alignment. And most people won't notice when alignment replaces effort. They'll keep pushing. You're softening. And softening isn't weakness. It's clarity without tension. This conversation doesn't end when the screen goes dark, because awareness doesn't switch off. It integrates. You'll notice something later tonight or tomorrow. A small moment that feels intentionally placed. And instead of questioning it the way you used to, you'll simply observe it. And maybe smile slightly, not because it's magical, but because it's coherent. The message isn't separate from you. It's the reflection of your current state. And that state will continue evolving, quietly, naturally, without announcement. You didn't learn something new here. You recognize something important. And recognition doesn't need applause, it needs space. So let this sit, not as conclusion, as continuation. Because what's reaching you is meeting you, and what meets you is mirroring who you are becoming. Not everyone will notice, but you already did.